Welcome to the Confluence podcast. My name is Evan TRXL, and I'm joined today by Randall Stevens, who is the CEO of AVAIL. And Randall, Confluence is your brainchild. I know that this has been something that's been going on for a few years now. And as an extension of Confluence, which I want you to get into here in a moment, kind of the premise behind that whole movement is this podcast and an extension of professional development and learning. And I couldn't be more excited to join you in kind of creating this way for people to get more into and behind the scenes of the software side of the AEC industry. So why don't you introduce yourself and then kick off the idea of, Confluence, where it came from and where it's been until now, and then maybe where we're going with all of this.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Again, my name's Randall Stevens, and I'm excited too. After I started talking to you about this conceptually, and you agreed to kind of jump in here and help to figure out how to get this going, couldn't be more excited along the same lines. Kind of the background, AVAIL, for those of you that aren't familiar with AVAIL, we're a software company in the AEC industry. And I've been in the AEC industry as a professional for over 30 years now, mainly in the technology side. And what I've found in my career path is that a lot of, we do less selling and more educating. So Confluence was kind of this brand extension of AVAIL, where it started back in 2019. We decided we wanted to bring several people to our hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, in October, which is a very special time of the year in Kentucky for those that haven't ever visited, and basically have a gathering where a little bit unique than other conferences and events that go on, where we really wanted to put the people building technology and building these solutions in the same room with the practitioners. So for us, Confluence was a way of basically, we intentionally did not make it about AVAIL. We kind of host the party and invite a lot of people in the industry, both on the technology provider side and the practitioner side, to just come. We theme it every year. I always say it's selfish for us. We need to be in those conversations ourselves to know what to build and what kind of tools to build. But we, as it's grown, right, we're now planning our 5th year of this annual event that we do. It's kind of grown in popularity. A lot of people have come and visited over the last 4 years that we've hosted this year, and we theme it. So it's a great way for everybody to come together. It's invite only. We do it over 3 days. It gives those people that are attending a really good outlet to discuss whatever the theme was, and for both the people building the technology and those putting it use in their firm, it gives everybody a really good, deep, in-depth 3 days to have conversations, get to know each other. That's a big part of it. After those 3 days, I like to think that, it's a pretty tight industry anyway. So you might know a third or half the people that are here or know of them, and the other half you will know after the end of the event. So that's kind of how it all started. We've been trying to slowly, kind of build up some more info on what this is about. But for AVAIL and this Confluence brand, what we've done is we've actually extended this beyond the professional development, are these conferences and events that we do. And this podcast will be a part of bringing information to the industry. But we also have started a higher ed version of this. We actually have our first higher ed training going on right now with students in our backyard here at the University of Kentucky College of Design. Some students are going through some Rhino training, which we've helped to line up and to provide. But the kind of goal on that front has been to not only provide and make sure that students around the world ultimately have access to these technologies, but maybe more importantly, to use our connections with people like yourself and others in the industry that have expertise to actually bring them in and let them, remotely do workshops and help, kind of upskill, what I would call upskill these students. And then ultimately that's a great pathway towards their employment when they're out of school. What are the firms, what kind of tools are they using? You would hope that they could hit the ground running kind of from a tools and technology standpoint as soon as they graduate.
So this idea of professional development in a live setting via the Confluence in-person events, and now this what I call like kind of the director's commentary track to AEC industry software, where it's like this behind the scenes look at what goes into building. It could be a feature, it could be a tool, it could be something bigger than that. We'll kind of see where this goes, but the idea behind the podcast itself, kind of building on these, like you said, invite only small events that really give you a view outside of your silo that you spend, most of the year in, to this broader perspective of people in the industry, that things that are the challenges that are either shared or not shared. There's a lot of sharing of information in there as well. The idea with the podcast is to build on that and use that momentum and go even deeper into, having more time to dive into a subject than you have even at these live events, because you would think 3 days sounds like a lot, and you do have a lot of content programmed in there, but it flies by and you have a very limited amount of time to actually spend on each topic, on each, presenter's material, even though you do have that time to really start to network and build relationships with those people. So to capitalize on that, I mean, that's really the idea behind this Confluence podcast, and to go do a deep dive into what makes the people tick, what makes the features stand out, what are the challenges and the problems that people are trying to solve on the software side of the industry. And I think there's going to be a natural audience for this kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I'm a big fan of the podcast called How I Built This. And since that name
Yeah.
is already taken, we have to come up with something else. But the whole idea is, yeah, like how did something come about and what's the story? I think a lot of software and building good software, there should be a good story behind it, right? What problems are
Mm,
being solved, being able to explain that, I think, and people are willing to tune in and listen and see what's kind of behind the scenes and what went into these things. I think ultimately it makes it easier to understand and use software when you kind of understand the intent and the kind of
yeah.
stories behind it. So I think that's part of it, that hopefully we'll be able to have people on this podcast and helping explain what they were doing, what challenges they had. It's not all rosy all the time. You don't always get it right, but usually there's some reason that you've made certain decisions, good, bad, or ugly. And I think being able to share that and be more open about it. Part of this is I'm also just a little bit surprised that everybody's got opinions, but they tend to not be proactive at trying to reach out and engage with companies like ours, even with our existing customers. It's like, I almost feel like we're having to drag things out of them instead of them proactively saying, hey,
Yeah.
what would make this better? Or, yeah, we get plenty of that, but I think there could be more and a richer
Mm,
conversation around that of imagining, and, you know, we're only as good as those conversations that we have with our customers. We can kind of invent things in our own head that we want to work on or think that would be useful based on those conversations. But the deeper and richer those conversations, the better. So hopefully this podcast will be a way to continue to kind of open up those conversations to a broader audience.
And I'm a tool junkie. I love analog tools, physical tools, and I also love digital tools. And there's a lot more that goes into these than meets the eye when you actually go to use whatever the feature is that you're going to be, expressing on this show. And so kind of again that behind the scenes look at what are the workflows of the people who are doing the software development, and kind of building the narrative around that tool set, building the actual tools themselves through the planning stage, but also in the development stage. And just kind of seeing that, I think, as software development is a bigger and bigger subject every day in AEC. There's a lot of people in firms who are developing, it could be a visual script in Grasshopper as an example, but it could also be something much bigger than that. It kind of gives that behind the scenes peek at how companies who are doing only this, into kind of what makes them tick, how they work, who's involved in that process, and what does that look like. I think all of that, to me, it really speaks to the tool junkie in me, And it's really fascinating to get into the kind of the reality show version of not just what ends up in the final software release or the version one software release, right? It's never final. I think will probably get into that in the show, right? This is a never ending quest to build tools. But to just see all that and to get ideas about that as a tool builder too is going to be a fascinating and I hope really useful thing that this show can help put out into the world to encourage more people to do it because it's like I said, it's becoming a bigger and bigger subject all the time.
Yeah, I studied architecture in school, have a degree in architecture, never practiced, went into the technology side. And I think a couple of things around this. One, I think the designers run a process. We run very similar processes as we're designing these kinds of tools. So I think there probably is just inherently some interest in what that process was and how you
Right.
started from, an idea or words, and it ends up being manifests itself, in our case, in a piece of software that somebody's going to use or a building, right, in the built environment. So I think there's a lot of parallels there that may catch people's attention just to have an interest kind of in what that process looked like. And then just to kind of go back to what you were talking about in general about trying to get this exposed to more people. We did this with the Confluence events that we have. I'll just show you real quick. This was last year's 3-day event, just to give you an idea, right? It was 3 days, kind of a packed schedule. You were in attendance. Lots of, not only programming and kind of social events that we all participate in, but it's really 3 days deep with those conversations. And then this year, we did our first, what we call regional event, which was a 1-day event. We plan on doing more of those. And it's back to how do we reach more people with these messages? And so we did one in Southern California. You were in attendance there as well. And we're going to be planning more of those in 2024. Again, having a day that's kind of 1 day instead of 3 days, where we can kind of extend the reach and the number of people that we can reach. We say we target design technology professionals. So it's the people that are influencing, in these firms that are responsible for looking for the new technologies, how they get implemented, how they're going to get used in the firm. So I think, besides the events that Confluence hosts and now this podcast with the kind of broader message from the technology providers that we can get out, I think it'll make a nice combination and hopefully more and more people will be able to, at the very least, turn into the podcast moving forward and maybe find that one of these regional events at the very least will be in your area and that you can come spend a day kind of involved in this yourself. We're also going to start a blog post from this. So when we have the speakers and the people talking at the physical events, those are going to manifest themselves in blog posts, and they'll be obviously the guests that come on the podcast and those types of things. So just excited to try to get this started. It's like everything. It's like getting it started is the hard part. Hopefully once we kind of get a rhythm to it, we'll start, I don't know what the frequency of the shows are going to be, but that's yet to be determined. But hopefully we'll find an audience that finds this interesting.
Yeah. So we're building an ecosystem here. There's many different kind of moving parts coming together. The name is perfect. It's the confluence of all of this stuff. And I think that there's obviously a lot to talk about here. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And you and I have built a network of professionals throughout the industry for a couple of decades at least now. And so we know some people who are going to have some amazing stories to tell, some insight to share. And I'm excited about that. And I would also just extend an invitation out there to our audience to put in the comments in this video right here, who do you want to see on this show? And we will do our best to make that happen. Or if our audience can help make that happen, I think that would be appreciated too, because we don't want this to be a one-way conversation. We really want to build a community here of people who are interested in the tool set of AEC and like the decisions that go into that and the why do we do what we do and then how did that manifest itself to come out into the tools that we use every day. I think it was Winston Churchill that said, we shape the buildings that then shape us. And I think what our goal here with this podcast is we talk about the people who shape the software, who shapes our industry. And that to me is going to be a fascinating conversation to have in many different aspects, and the many different characters involved in this ecosystem that we're putting together with Confluence. So I'm happy to probably stop talking about the introduction to the show here, because it doesn't need to be long, but just know that we have a couple episodes that are going to be coming out very shortly, and we're going to be talking about the tools immediately here, and it's going to be a fun conversation. So I hope everybody's up for it.
Excited about the journey, and thanks for helping with this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, so we'll see everybody on the first episode.